This video is in three parts, starting with a quick look at the ZT02 88.8 watt hour 24,000 milliamp hour charger, and swiftly moving on to why I might seem to have an obsession with collecting power banks and how I use them with my growing collection of 5V USB chargeable gadgets. And then to finish off, I thought it might be useful to compare and contrast my collection of power banks so far and talk about what does and doesn't work for me. The ZT02 does not sport any branding, though it's sold by Bogseth and looks like one of the many generic power banks that are available. Must confess that I not only chose it because of its watt hour capacity, the price and the 3 power outputs, but because it had the same form factor as my TOPK power bank, which has been very reliable, albeit that this case is plastic and not metal. The ZT02 has a matte black soft plastic cover and has a capacity of 88.8 watt hours based on 24,000 milliamp hours at 3.7 volts. Charging is via either the micro USB or USB-C ports, and power delivery is from the 2 USB-A ports and the same USB-C port. It has fast charging and a claimed 22.5 watts delivery potential. As with all power banks these days, it seems maximum claimed power output is based on 12 volts, in this case at 1.6 amps from the USB-C port, but in my reality I'll be drawing a maximum of 3 amps at 5 volts, i.e. 15 watts. The ZT02 has an LED status display, which I have to say will be a must-have for me in future purchases. To my mind, it's relatively heavy at 409 grams, especially when compared to the metal jacketed TOPK, which weighs only 28 grams more. So why am I continuing to add to my power bank collection? Quite simply, the number of gadgets I own which can be charged via USB has steadily increased, such that the 240 volt mains power users in the house are predominantly the larger domestic products like the fridge, the TV and the soup maker. So from my phone to my toothbrush, and including GoPro, Pocket 2, Kindle, Sony ZV-1, Walkman, head torch, drone, tablet, LED lights, Bluetooth speakers, as well as many others, I only need a power bank with USB output to keep them charged or to make them work. However, because they are distributed around the house, it's far easier to also have dedicated power banks. If I was charging the power banks via wall sockets, then this would be a totally inefficient, energy wasting process. However, this last summer I installed 4 100-watt EcoFlow solar panels on the wall of the house to charge my EcoFlow Delta 2 power station, and even here in Scotland in November it is charging sufficiently via solar to charge all my power banks in rotation. Effectively, this means that because I'm charging all the power banks via solar, the gadgets are working without any demand on electricity from the grid. When it comes to my small collection of power banks, this is what does and doesn't work for me. Smaller power banks advertised as having 5,000 or 10,000 milliamp capacity are only useful in my case for emergencies when out and about, or to charge specific gadgets like my Pocket 2. Otherwise, I won't buy a power bank with less than 74 watt hour capacity these days. At least 2 output ports are an absolute must. Having used the LED display and LED lights variants to show outstanding capacity, I would not buy the LED light version going forward, as they only really act as a best guess, and I've been caught out with them emptying when I thought I had at least 25% capacity remaining based on a lingering LED light shining brightly. I may be completely wrong, but I think you can get lucky with some of the generic or little known brand power banks. The TOPK is a case in point, it just keeps delivering with no fuss, unlike some of the better known brands I've used. I also think the pricing per watt hour is interesting when comparing power stations and the various power banks. Obviously, most top brand power stations have multiple input and output options, typically mains, USB and 12 volts, and if we ignore sale or discounted prices, the cost per watt hour seems to be commonly set at around £1 in the UK. Power banks, on the other hand, in the 60 to 90 watt hour capacity range cost about 30 pence per watt hour, but of course you don't get the inverter, solar controller, transformer and power management options that you get in a power station. However, combining power banks and power stations has given me a degree of flexibility at a lower price compared to swapping power stations on the solar panels. Whilst it's horses for courses, if you don't need high watts to power a laptop or similar from a power bank, then the 70 to 80 watt power banks are a potential sweet spot in terms of capacity and price. It's all good.